The millionaire humiliated the dish served by the waitress. "You filthy! This looks like beggar's food." But she said something that brought him to his knees. The rain pounded against the windows of the small restaurant, a rhythmic drumming that filled the otherwise quiet space. Theodore Caldwell stepped inside, barely concealing his irritation as he shook droplets from his expensive coat. He had no business being in a place like this, a small, unassuming diner tucked away in a forgotten corner of Chicago. But circumstances had forced him here. His usual high-end steakhouse was fully booked, and his business partner had insisted on meeting at a more casual location. He had scoffed at the idea, but ultimately relented. Now, standing in the dimly lit interior, he regretted every second of it. He took a seat at a worn-out booth, the vinyl creaking under his weight. The laminated menu in front of him looked cheap, stained from years of use. He scanned it with disdain, barely registering the words before sighing impatiently. A young waitress approached, holding a notepad. She was in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail and eyes that held a quiet resilience. "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you?" Theodore barely glanced up. "Something edible, preferably." The waitress didn't flinch. "Our house special is the best thing on the menu." He sighed dramatically. "Fine, bring me that." She nodded, scribbled down his order, and walked away. Theodore checked his watch. He was already regretting agreeing to this meeting. He had better things to do than waste time in a place that smelled like grease and old coffee. Minutes later, the plate arrived, steaming and carefully arranged. But when Theodore looked at it, his lips curled in disgust. "This is the house special?" he asked, lifting a fork with hesitation. The waitress standing beside him nodded. "Yes, sir." His scoff was loud enough to make nearby diners glance over. "This looks like something you'd serve at a homeless shelter." He pushed the plate away, shaking his head. "I came here for food, not whatever this is." The restaurant fell into an uncomfortable silence. Conversations died down. Eyes darted toward them. The waitress inhaled sharply, her fingers tightening around the notepad, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her apron and pulled out a small, slightly crumpled photograph. Without a word, she placed it on the table in front of him. "Before you say anything else," she said quietly, "you might want to see this." Theodore frowned, picking up the photo with mild annoyance. He expected some sentimental nonsense, a plea for sympathy, maybe a picture of struggling employees, or a charity event. But the moment his eyes focused on the image, something inside him shifted. It was a kitchen, warm and inviting, with a woman standing in the center, holding a plate identical to the one in front of him. She was smiling, her expression radiant, filled with a kind of joy that was both familiar and deeply painful. His breath caught in his throat. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the photo over. It was her, Margarita, the love he had abandoned, the woman he had spent years pretending he had forgotten. The room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. His gaze flickered upward, settling on the waitress, and for the first time, he really looked at her. The shape of her eyes, the way she furrowed her brow, the sharp yet delicate angles of her face. A creeping realization crawled up his spine, cold and relentless. She looked like her. No, she looked like him. His blood ran ice cold. The waitress, Luna, misread his silence. She sighed, her voice softer now. "My mother passed away a few years ago," she said, folding her arms. "This was the last dish she ever made. I've been keeping her recipe alive since then." Theodore felt the world shift beneath him. The food he had just mocked wasn't just a meal. It was the final connection to a woman he had abandoned, a woman who had raised a daughter without him, a daughter who had no idea who he really was. His throat tightened. She didn't know. Luna didn't know, but he did. The realization hit him with the force of a train. His stomach lurched. His hands clenched into fists. He had a daughter for years. He had lived in luxury, believing himself untouchable. But in a single moment, everything he thought he knew crumbled. The restaurant around him faded into the background. The only thing that existed now was the woman standing before him, the stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. His chest felt hollow, his pulse erratic. Then, before he could stop himself, he did something he had never done in his life. He fell to his knees. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Luna took a step back, frowning in confusion. "Sir, are you okay?" But Theodore couldn't answer. For the first time in decades, Theodore Caldwell felt something unfamiliar and terrifying. Regret. Real, suffocating regret. And as the weight of lost years pressed down on him, tears slipped down his face. He had spent his entire life chasing power and wealth, and in doing so, he had lost something far more precious: a daughter. Luna still looked at him, waiting for an answer, but Theodore had none, because nothing he could say would undo the past. Nothing could erase the years they had lost. And the worst part, he wasn't sure if he would ever get a second chance. Theodore Caldwell sat in the back seat of his sleek black town car, his hands gripping the leather armrest as he stared out into the city beyond the rain-speckled window. The normally familiar skyline of Chicago looked foreign tonight, blurred and distorted by the storm outside. Or maybe it wasn't the rain. Maybe it was the chaos in his own mind. Luna. The name echoed over and over, growing louder, refusing to be ignored. He ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. How had this happened? How had he lived decades without knowing? How had he never once looked back? His stomach churned at the thought, because the truth was, he had looked back many times, but every time he felt the whisper of regret creeping up, he had shoved it down, convincing himself that he had done the right thing, that success required sacrifice, that love, no matter how deep, could never replace power. But now, sitting alone in the dim light of the car, he realized he had been a fool. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat, but the second his eyelids shut, the past came flooding in. 24 years ago, he was 19, young, stupid, arrogant. Harvard had always been the plan, not just his plan, his father's plan. Because in the Caldwell family, there was no room for second place. You either conquered the world, or you were left behind, and Theodore had been raised to win. He had it all mapped out. He would graduate from Harvard, take over the family business, and cement the Caldwell legacy. But then he met Margarita Silva, and suddenly, his perfect plan didn't seem so perfect anymore. She had been everything he never knew he needed. Smart, kind, fierce in a way that both challenged and fascinated him. She was the kind of woman who made you believe in forever, and for one perfect summer, they had spent those months in their own world, wrapped up in each other, promising things that should never have been broken. "I don't care where we live, Theodore," she had whispered to him one night under the stars. "I just want us to be together." And God help him. He had wanted that too. But reality came crashing in. His father found out. "You think love will make you successful?" His father had scoffed, swirling a glass of bourbon in one hand. "You think you can throw away your future for some girl? She's not some girl. Then prove it," his father challenged. "Choose her, give up Harvard, give up your future, your inheritance, your name. Choose her, and see what's left of you in 5 years. Theodore had felt the trap close around him. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself Margarita would understand. "I'll come back for you," he had promised, gripping her hands, trying to ignore the tears in her eyes. "I just need time." But she had shaken her head, her voice breaking. "No, Theodore, if you go, don't come back." And like a coward, he had left for years. He convinced himself it was for the best, that she would move on, that he would move on. That time would heal whatever pain lingered. But now, staring at Luna, staring at his daughter, he realized how cruelly mistaken he had been. The car jerked to a stop in front of his penthouse building. Mark, his driver, cleared his throat. "We're here, sir." Theodore barely heard him. His fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone. He hesitated before typing a name he hadn't dared search in over 2 decades. Margarita Silva. The first result sent a cold chill down his spine. An obituary. His breath caught. His chest tightened as he clicked the link, his pulse hammering against his temples. Margarita Silva, 42, passed away peacefully in her home. She is survived by her daughter, Luna Silva, 5 years ago. She had died 5 years ago, while he had been making billion-dollar deals, hosting charity galas, standing on the covers of magazines. She had been gone. The thought nearly made him sick. She had raised Luna alone, struggled alone, and he hadn't been there. His shaking hands scrolled further. There was no mention of a husband, no family, Just her and Luna. Had she ever tried to reach him? Had she ever wanted to? A new, darker thought took root in his mind. What if she had? What if she had tried to tell him and he never knew? The question clawed at him. Refusing to be ignored, he needed answers. Without thinking, he opened another tab and searched for something else. Silva's Diner, the restaurant where Luna worked, the place where she had confronted him, unknowingly handing him the biggest revelation of his life. It wasn't just a restaurant to her. It was her mother's legacy, and he had mocked it, humiliated it. His throat tightened. How could he ever make this right? For the first time in decades, Theodore Caldwell felt utterly powerless. His money couldn't change the past. His name couldn't erase the years of absence. But one thing was certain. This time, he wouldn't run. This time, he would fix what he had broken. Even if it was too late, Theodore had always been a man who thrived on control. Every aspect of his life was meticulously planned. Every decision calculated. That was how he built his empire. Through precision, through knowing every angle before making a move. But tonight, as he sat in his penthouse office, staring at the cold glow of his laptop screen, he felt completely unmoored. A daughter. He had a daughter, and he had lived decades without knowing. The thought was unbearable. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, with a deep breath, he typed 2 words into the search bar. Luna Silva. A flood of images filled the screen. Most from social media. Others from news articles about Silva's Diner. He clicked the first image. There she was. The same young woman who had stared him down in that restaurant. Her eyes filled with quiet strength, unaware of the truth she had just revealed to him. In some photos, she was behind the counter, apron tied around her waist, smiling faintly at the camera. In others, she was in the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves, flour dusting her hands. A normal life, a simple life, one he had never been a part of. The ache in his chest deepened. He kept scrolling, absorbing every detail. And then, he saw it. A picture of Luna, standing outside the diner in the background, barely visible through the window, was a framed photograph of Margarita. His breath hitched. His hands moved on their own, opening a new tab, pulling up Margarita Silva's obituary again. Her death notice was painfully brief, a few lines summing up an entire life. But Theodore knew better than to take things at face value. He needed more. His jaw tightened as he reached for his phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before a voice answered. "This is Daniel Brooks Investigations." Theodore didn't waste time. "Daniel, it's Caldwell." There was a pause, then a chuckle. Well, been a long time, Theo. Last time you called me, you were chasing down a board member who was embezzling funds. What's the job?" "I need information," Theodore said, his voice clipped. "On a woman named Margarita Silva and her daughter. Luna?" Another pause. "Silva? You mean from that diner downtown?" Theodore's grip on the phone tightened. "You know it." "Yeah. It's been around for years. Word is it almost shut down after the owner passed." A sharp pang hit Theodore's chest. "Find out everything," he ordered. "I want to know if she ever tried to contact me. If she sent letters, anything." Daniel exhaled. "You think someone kept you in the dark? I need to be sure." "All right, give me 24 hours. Theodore ended the call and exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. 24 hours. He had spent 24 years ignorant of his daughter's existence. Now, waiting even a single day felt unbearable. The next evening, Theodore sat at the edge of his leather chair, fingers drumming against the desk. His laptop was open, but he hadn't done a single thing all day. Then, his phone rang. "Daniel?" He answered immediately. "Tell me." There was a long sigh on the other end. "You're not gonna like this." Theodore's stomach clenched. "Go on." "She tried, Theo." The room tilted. "What?" "Margarita. She tried to contact you." Theodore felt the air leave his lungs. "How?" Daniel continued, voice measured. "After you left for Harvard, she sent letters, multiple times. First to your dorm, later to your father's office." Theodore's fingers curled into a fist. His father. "What happened to them?" he demanded. "I got my hands on one," Daniel said. "She poured her heart into it, man. She begged you to come back, said she wasn't asking for money, just for you to know." Theodore's jaw clenched so hard it ached. "None of the letters ever reached you," Daniel continued. Your father intercepted them, had them sent back. His vision blurred with fury. That bastard. Yeah, Daniel hesitated. But it gets worse. Theodore's body tensed. She didn't just try letters, Daniel said. She showed up. The world came to a stop. What? She went to one of your father's events. You weren't there. But he was. She tried to tell him in person. Theodore swallowed hard. And, Daniel hesitated. Say it. Your father told her you wanted nothing to do with her. That you had moved on. Were engaged to some heiress. The room spun. Theodore gripped the desk to steady himself, nausea rising in his throat. His father had destroyed everything. He had stolen his chance to know his daughter. Margarita never tried again after that, Daniel finished. She raised Luna alone. Theodore barely heard the rest. The past slammed into him, suffocating. Every choice he had made, every step that led him here, had been built on a lie. His father had dictated his entire life, even in ways he never realized. His father had taken his family from him. Theodore's breath was ragged, his pulse pounding. He had spent years thinking he had made a necessary sacrifice. But in the end, the choice was never really his. He had been manipulated, kept in the dark, and because of that, Margarita had died thinking he had abandoned her. Luna had grown up believing she was unwanted. He slammed his fist against the desk, sending papers flying. He had wasted so much time. A deep, gut-wrenching grief settled over him. But grief wouldn't fix this. Neither would anger. For the first time in his life, Theodore knew exactly what he had to do. No more hesitating, no more excuses. Luna deserved the truth, and he would spend every last breath proving that she mattered. Theodore Caldwell had built an empire on strategy, on knowing when to move and when to wait. He had spent decades perfecting the art of control. But now, sitting in his office as the city hummed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt utterly powerless. The truth had been laid bare before him. Margarita had tried to reach him. She had wanted him to know. And his father, his own flesh and blood, had made sure that never happened. The rage still simmered beneath his skin, a quiet, burning thing that refused to be extinguished. But rage wouldn't help him now. He needed a plan. And it started with Luna. The problem was, he had no idea how to approach her. How do you tell someone you're their father after 24 years of absence? How do you even begin to fix something that broken? He exhaled sharply and grabbed his phone. Daniel Brooks had barely finished his greeting before Theodore cut in. I need everything you found on Luna, where she lives. What she does outside the restaurant. I need to know who she is. Daniel hesitated. You sure about this, Theo? You want to dig that deep? I don't have a choice. There was a pause before the investigator sighed. All right, I'll send you everything I have. Minutes later, Theodore's laptop screen was filled with files, photos and reports. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning over every detail. Luna Silva, age 24, lives in a small apartment in Pilsen, a neighborhood filled with artists, college students, and struggling dreamers. The building was old but well kept, with flower boxes lining the windows. No significant relationships. No father figure. Worked full-time at Silva's diner. Took on extra shifts. Dreamed of expanding the restaurant someday. But finances made it impossible. She was hardworking, resilient. She had built a life for herself with nothing. A sharp pang settled in his chest. That should have been his job. He should have been there to help. To protect her. To tell her she wasn't alone. Instead, she had struggled while he had lived in luxury. He clenched his jaw, forcing the guilt down. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something now. And that started with getting close to her, without scaring her away. The next evening, Theodore parked his sleek black Mercedes 2 blocks away from Silva's diner. He had no intention of barging in, demanding attention. Not yet. Instead, he observed, the restaurant was small, tucked between a laundromat and a second-hand bookstore. The neon sign flickered slightly, giving the place a nostalgic, almost forgotten charm. Through the window, he saw Luna moving between tables, balancing plates effortlessly. She smiled at customers, spoke easily, but there was something guarded about her. She reminded him of Margarita. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. He couldn't just walk in and tell her the truth. She would never believe him. He had to start small. careful, deliberate. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the diner. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Luna barely glanced up. "Sit anywhere," she called over her shoulder, hands full with a tray. Theodore hesitated before choosing a booth in the corner, where he could watch without drawing too much attention. A few minutes later, Luna appeared at his table, notepad in hand. She froze for a fraction of a second when she recognized him. Then, her expression turned to ice. "You again?" Theodore forced himself to keep his tone even. "I was in the neighborhood." Her eyes narrowed. "And out of all the restaurants in Chicago, you ended up here. I figured I'd give the food another chance." Luna let out a scoff. "That's rich coming from you." "I was an ass," he admitted. "I shouldn't have said what I did." She blinked, caught off guard by the admission. But then she straightened. Fine. What do you want?" "Just dinner." Luna studied him, then exhaled sharply. "Whatever. What are you having?" He glanced at the menu, but the words blurred. There was only one thing he wanted. The house special. Luna's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if she hadn't expected that, but she didn't say anything. She just scribbled it down and walked away. Theodore returned every night that week. At first, Luna remained distant, wary of his presence, but something changed. She stopped flinching every time she saw him, stopped looking at him like he was an unwelcome ghost. He made small talk. She kept her answers short. Clipped, but she answered. It was a start. By the fifth night, as she placed the plate in front of him, she crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. "So, what's your deal?" Theodore paused, lifting his fork. "What do you mean?" "You're a billionaire," she said bluntly. "I Googled you." That made him smirk. "Did you?" She ignored the amusement in his voice. "Why the hell are you eating here every night?" He hesitated. "I like the food." Luna let out a dry laugh. "Bullshit." Theodore's lips twitched, but he didn't argue. She shook her head. "You're weird, Caldwell." It was the first time she had said his name. Something inside him shifted. He wanted to tell her everything, wanted to lay the truth bare, but not yet, not until she trusted him enough to listen. For now, he would wait. For now, he would take whatever she was willing to give, and for the first time in his life, Theodore Caldwell was willing to be patient. Luna hadn't decided if Theodore Caldwell was persistent or just plain annoying. For the past 7 nights, he had walked into Silva's diner at the exact same time, taken the exact same booth, and ordered the exact same dish. Her mother's house special. At first, she thought it was some kind of elaborate joke. Maybe he was trying to prove a point after their first disastrous encounter. But then, as the days passed, her irritation shifted into something else. Curiosity. Why would a man like him, a billionaire, spend his time in a rundown diner like this? She had searched his name online. Theodore Caldwell wasn't just some random rich guy. He was a legend in the corporate world, a ruthless businessman known for turning failing companies into gold mines. He had no reason to be here, and yet here he was, every single night. Tonight was no different. The door chimed as he entered, dressed in another expensive suit that looked ridiculously out of place in a restaurant where the tables wobbled and the coffee cups were mismatched. Luna sighed, grabbing a notepad as she approached his booth. "Let me guess. The house special." Theodore looked up, a slight smirk playing at his lips. "You know me so well." She rolled her eyes but wrote it down anyway. "You do realize we have other things on the menu, right?" "I like consistency," he replied. She gave him a pointed look. "Or maybe you're just obsessive." His smirk widened. "You've been researching me." Luna crossed her arms. "Hard not to. You're everywhere. Business magazines, financial networks. Hell, I found an article about your watch collection." He raised an eyebrow. "And what's your verdict?" She narrowed her eyes. "That you don't belong here." Theodore didn't flinch. If anything, he looked amused. "Maybe I'm exactly where I need to be," Luna scoffed. "Right, because billionaires just love eating in diners. Some of us do." She shook her head, muttering something under her breath before turning away. But before she could leave, he spoke again. "Tell me about her." Luna froze. Her grip on the notepad tightened. Slowly, she turned back to him. "What?" Theodore leaned forward slightly, his gaze unreadable. "Your mother, Margarita." The name sent a familiar ache through her chest. She should have been furious that he had the audacity to bring her up. But instead, all she felt was confusion. Why did he care? Luna hesitated before answering. She was everything this place represents. Theodore's expression softened. Which is? Luna exhaled, shifting her weight. Warmth, family, a place where no one felt alone. She swallowed. She built this diner from nothing. Worked herself to the bone to keep it running. She sounds remarkable, he said, voice quieter now. Luna nodded. She was. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The diner buzzed with the usual evening crowd, clinking plates, murmured conversations, the hum of an old jukebox in the background. Luna hated how easy it was to talk to him. She hated the way he listened, the way his presence, despite everything, was oddly comforting, and that terrified her. She cleared her throat. I'll get your food. Then she walked away before he could ask anything else. 20 minutes later, Luna placed the plate in front of him without a word. He picked up his fork, studying the dish like it held a secret he was trying to unravel. Then, to her surprise, he spoke again. I know what it's like to lose someone. Luna glanced at him, frowning. My mother, he continued, taking a slow bite of the meal. She died when I was young, cancer. Luna wasn't sure why he was telling her this. She wasn't even sure why she cared. Still, she found herself asking, how old were you? 10. Luna swallowed. 10 was young, too young. She didn't respond, but Theodore didn't seem to expect her to. He took another bite, nodding to himself. You're right, this is good. Luna huffed a laugh, crossing her arms. Took you long enough to figure that out. I can admit when I'm wrong, he said easily. She arched an eyebrow. Can you? Theodore smirked. It's rare, but yes. Luna shook her head, despite the small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But for the first time, she didn't completely hate his presence. And that was new. 2 hours later, the diner had emptied out. The chairs were flipped onto tables, the floors mopped, the lights dimmed. Luna stood behind the counter, balancing the register. When she realized he was still there, Theodore sat in his booth. Sipping what had to be his 4th cup of coffee, she sighed. You know, most people leave when the place closes. He glanced at the clock. You're technically still open. For 5 more minutes, he smirked. Plenty of time. Luna rolled her eyes, wiping down the counter. Why are you really here? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. Maybe I just enjoy the company. Luna stopped wiping. Her heart did something weird in her chest. Something she didn't like, something dangerous. She set the rag down and sighed. Don't get used to it, he chuckled. Noted. She shook her head. But she didn't push him out. Not tonight. And for some reason, she knew, deep down, that this wasn't the last time he'd linger after hours. For the first time in a long time, Theodore Caldwell found himself in unfamiliar territory. Business negotiations. He could do them in his sleep. High-stakes deals. Second nature. But sitting in a worn-out diner, slowly earning the trust of a daughter who didn't even know who he was, that was a battlefield he had never prepared for. Luna hadn't completely warmed up to him, but the shift was noticeable. She no longer scowled the moment he walked in. She no longer treated him like an invader in her world. And most importantly, she let him stay. But the weight of who he was to her pressed down on him more each day. Every interaction, every small conversation felt like an unbearable secret between them. He wanted to tell her. But how did you say something like that without completely shattering someone's world? For now, he took what she gave him. Tonight, that meant sitting at his usual booth, sipping coffee while watching Luna work. It had become a habit. She moved with effortless efficiency, weaving between tables, balancing trays, chatting with regulars. She was nothing like him, and yet, in the smallest of ways, he could see glimpses of himself. The focus, the determination, the subtle way she observed people, always reading the room. She had his blood, but she had Margarita's heart. That thought almost made him smile. Almost. Luna approached his table, tossing a menu in front of him. Still ordering the same thing? Theodore smirked. You sound disappointed. I just don't get how a man who probably dines with politicians finds comfort in a plate of food from a greasy spoon diner. His smirk faded slightly. Maybe it reminds me of something. Luna blinked at that. Of what? His fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic mug. Something I should have appreciated more when I had the chance. She frowned but didn't push. Instead, she sighed and pulled a notepad from her apron. Fine. How special again. He nodded, watching as she jotted it down. You know, he mused, for someone who claims to run a warm and welcoming diner, you're still pretty hostile. Luna gave him a dry look. I don't trust people who suddenly take an interest in things they ignored before. His jaw tightened slightly. Is that what you think? She crossed her arms. People like you don't just show up in places like this without a reason. He had a reason. She just didn't know it yet. Before he could respond, an older woman sitting at the counter called out, Luna, sweetie, can you grab me a coffee refill? Luna turned her attention to the woman, smiling as she grabbed the pot from the warmer. Theodore watched the interaction carefully, the way the woman patted Luna's hand as she spoke. The way Luna leaned in, listening intently, that was Margarita's influence. She had built something special here, a place where people weren't just customers. They were family. Luna had inherited that from her, not from him, and that realization stung more than he cared to admit. An hour later, the diner had quieted down, the rush of customers thinning. Luna took a seat behind the counter, rolling her neck to ease the tension. She didn't notice Theodore watching her until she exhaled dramatically. Tired? He asked, setting his empty coffee cup aside. She scoffed. Always? He leaned back slightly. Do you ever take a break? She smirked. Do billionaires ever stop working? Touché. Theodore studied her for a moment before asking, was this always the plan? Running the diner? Luna hesitated, like she wasn't sure how much to say. No, she admitted. I wanted to be a chef. Went to culinary school for a while, but things didn't go as planned. His stomach tightened, because he knew what that meant. Money. She didn't have the means to finish. His daughter, his only daughter, had sacrificed her dream, while he had spent decades accumulating wealth he never even needed. The irony was cruel. What happened? He asked, keeping his voice neutral. Luna shrugged. My mom got sick. The bills piled up. I dropped out to help her. Theodore felt like he had been punched in the gut. His own daughter had struggled to keep her mother alive, while he had been too blind to know either of them existed. The guilt was suffocating. Luna stretched her arms, oblivious to the storm inside him. It's fine, though. The diner was always my mom's dream, and now it's mine. But what about your dream? She blinked at him, caught off guard. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. Then, she shrugged it off. Dreams don't pay the bills. Something inside Theodore snapped, because those were his words. Not spoken by him, but by his father. Dreams don't build empires, Theodore. Dreams don't make you successful. He had lived his life believing that. And now, so had she. He leaned forward, his tone softer than before. That's not true. Luna gave him a skeptical look. Says the billionaire. Theodore exhaled. Trust me, Luna. If I could do it over, I wouldn't have given up the things that mattered for success. Her brows furrowed slightly. You regret it. Every damn day. But he just nodded. More than you know. For the first time, she seemed to really look at him, like she wasn't just tolerating his presence, but actually seeing him. It was a small shift, but it was enough. Luna leaned back on her elbows, letting out a small, dry chuckle. You're not what I expected. He raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? She smirked. An arrogant, self-absorbed rich guy who didn't know what real food was. His lips twitched. Well, you weren't entirely wrong. Luna laughed. A real, genuine laugh. The sound of it nearly undid him. For the briefest moment, he imagined what life could have been like if he had known her all these years, if he had been there, but he couldn't dwell on what-ifs, because he had something real right in front of him. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Theodore had spent his life making decisions that shaped industries, crushed competitors, and secured his empire. He had built a fortune through sheer strategy and unshakable control. But watching Luna work every night, seeing the exhaustion settle in her shoulders, the way she forced herself to smile for customers while barely keeping the restaurant running, that was a problem he didn't know how to fix. Not without scaring her away. He wanted to help, No, he needed to help. But Luna didn't trust him. And if there was one thing he understood about her, it was that she wouldn't take a handout. So, he needed a plan. A quiet, careful plan. And tonight, that plan was put to the test. It started with a letter. Luna had been in the back taking inventory when one of the younger waitresses, Sophia, grabbed the envelope from the stack of mail near the register. Luna. Luna wiped her hands on a rag, coming out of the storage room. "What's up?" Sophia held out the letter, her face uncertain. "This looks bad." Luna frowned as she took it. The envelope was thick, the kind that didn't just carry words but legal threats. She tore it open, her stomach twisting, the moment her eyes landed on the first few lines. Her heart stopped. Past due balance. Final notice before legal action. Luna's breath hitched. No, 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 no. She flipped to the second page, scanning the text. The diner's property taxes were behind. Way behind. She had paid what she could, but her mother's medical debt had drained everything. And now they were threatening seizure of the building. She slammed the letter down on the counter. Sophia chewed on her lip. "Luna, what does it say?" Luna forced her voice to stay steady. "It's fine." Sophia didn't look convinced. That didn't look fine. Luna swallowed the lump in her throat. "I said it's fine, but it wasn't. Not even close." Theodore watched her from across the diner, eyes narrowed as she moved through the restaurant with barely concealed panic. Something had happened. He had never seen Luna rattled before. She was always composed, always in control. But now she looked like a storm was raging inside her. She barely spoke to the customers. Her hands trembled when she refilled a coffee cup, and once, when she thought no one was looking, she rubbed at her temples, muttering under her breath. Theodore clenched his jaw. He had spent too long on the sidelines. Time to act. An hour later, Luna stood outside the diner, gripping the letter so tightly that the paper crumpled in her fist. The cold Chicago air bit at her skin, but she barely felt it. She had 1 month, 30 days to come up with the money, or the only thing she had left of her mother would be gone. She felt sick. She could work every single day, pull extra shifts, but it wouldn't be enough, not even close. A deep voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Luna startled, turning to see Theodore leaning against the side of the building, hands in his coat pockets. She scowled. "Were you spying on me?" He raised an eyebrow. "I was leaving. You were standing here looking like you were about to fight the air." Luna huffed, shoving the letter into her coat pocket. "It's nothing." Theodore's gaze darkened. "That's a lie." She folded her arms. "And why do you care?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Because, Luna, despite what you think, I don't like seeing people lose what matters to them," she scoffed. "Really, the billionaire is suddenly sentimental." He didn't react to her jab. "What's wrong?" Luna clenched her fists. "It's none of your business." She started to walk away, but Theodore stepped in front of her, his tone calm but firm. "Luna, if you need help..." She let out a bitter laugh. "Help. From you." Theodore's patience thinned. "Why is that such an impossible idea?" "Because people like you don't help without expecting something in return." The words hit harder than he expected. Because wasn't that exactly how he had lived his entire life? Transactional, conditional, a give-and-take world where generosity was just another form of leverage. But this wasn't about business. This was about her, the only thing that had ever mattered that he didn't even know existed. Theodore exhaled slowly, forcing his voice to stay steady. "What if I told you I don't want anything?" Luna shook her head. "I don't believe you." The hurt in her voice gutted him, but he couldn't blame her. Why should she trust him? He hadn't earned it. Not yet. Instead of pushing, he took a step back, softening his approach. "Fine," he said. "Then tell me what you'd do if you could get help." Luna hesitated, because the answer was obvious. She wanted to save the diner. She wanted to keep her mother's legacy alive, but that wasn't possible. So she shook her head. "Doesn't matter." Theodore studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right." Luna frowned. "All right. What?" He gave her a small, unreadable smile. "All right. I'll leave it alone." She narrowed her eyes. "Suspicious. You're just dropping it." For now, she didn't trust that answer, but she let it go. "Good," she muttered, brushing past him. See you around, Caldwell. Theodore didn't stop her, but as she disappeared inside, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Daniel, he said when the investigator picked up. Yeah, I need numbers. Daniel hesitated. Numbers. For Silva's diner, Theodore clarified. How much debt? What's their financial situation? And don't just check the obvious stuff. Dig deep. There was a pause. Then Daniel whistled. Man, you're really invested in this, huh? Theodore didn't hesitate. More than you know, because Luna might not trust him yet. But that didn't mean he was going to sit back and watch her lose everything. She might not want his help, but she was going to get it anyway. Luna had learned at an early age that life didn't hand out miracles. If you wanted something, you worked for it. If things got hard, you pushed through. That was what her mother had taught her. That was what had kept her going after Margarita's death. So, as she sat in the empty diner before sunrise, staring at the final notice on the counter, she knew one thing for certain. No one was coming to save her. She had 30 days to come up with an impossible amount of money, and no amount of extra shifts or carefully counted tips would change that. Her hands curled into fists. She refused to let this place go. She just didn't know how to stop it from happening. A soft chime from the door startled her. Luna's head snapped up, expecting Sophia or one of the other morning staff. Instead, Theodore Caldwell stood in the doorway, dressed in another impeccably tailored suit, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Luna scowled. You do know we're not open yet, right? Theodore didn't seem fazed. He stepped inside, placing one of the cups on the counter in front of her. You look like you need this. Luna eyed him suspiciously before snatching the cup. Bribing me with coffee now, he smirked. It's not a bribe, it's a peace offering. She scoffed, but took a sip. Damn it, it was good. She reluctantly met his gaze. Why are you really here, Caldwell? Theodore leaned against the counter, expression unreadable. Maybe I just wanted to check on you. Luna narrowed her eyes. I don't need checking on. He tilted his head. You don't need help either, right? Her jaw tightened. I really don't. Theodore sighed, as if debating whether or not to push further. But before he could, the bell above the door jingled again, and Sophia rushed in, holding a newspaper like it was on fire. Luna frowned. What? You're gonna want to see this, Sophia blurted out, practically shoving the paper at her. Confused, Luna grabbed it and scanned the front page. Her stomach dropped. Local landmark gets a last-minute savior. The fight to save Silva's diner. Her hands tightened on the paper. Sophia was grinning. Someone made a huge anonymous donation. It cleared the back taxes, covered the debts, the diner's safe. Luna's vision blurred for a second. Her heart pounded as she read the article. It detailed how an unknown benefactor had stepped in at the last moment, making sure the diner wouldn't be seized. It felt impossible, miraculous. Her hands shook as she put the paper down. Who did this? Sophia shrugged. No one knows, but whoever it was just saved your ass. Luna barely heard her because the moment she glanced up, her eyes locked with Theodore's. He didn't say a word, didn't admit anything, but he didn't have to, because she knew. Her blood ran hot. Luna stood so fast that the stool screeched against the floor. She grabbed his arm and dragged him out of the diner, ignoring his calm amusement. The moment they were outside, she whirled on him. Tell me it wasn't you. Theodore's face was unreadable. Would it matter if it was? Luna clenched her teeth. Yes. Why? She let out a frustrated noise. Because this isn't how it works. You don't just walk into my life and start fixing things like you have any right to. Theodore exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Luna. No. She cut in, pointing at him. I didn't ask for your help. I told you I could handle it. He studied her for a long moment. Then, in a quiet, calm voice, he said, Could you? The question hit like a punch. Luna hated that she didn't have an answer. She hated that. Deep down, she knew the truth. She had been drowning, and Theodore had pulled her above water, but that didn't mean she had to like it. Luna took a step back, crossing her arms. Why? Theodore's jaw tensed. Because you shouldn't have to lose the only thing that matters to you. Her stomach twisted. Because those words, they hurt. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she had been carrying so much weight for so long that she didn't know what to do with it now that someone had lifted part of it. Maybe because no one, not a single person, had ever stepped in for her before. Or maybe because, standing here, looking into Theodore Caldwell's eyes, she felt something unfamiliar, something dangerous, something like she wanted to believe him, but she couldn't. Luna let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "You don't get to play hero, Caldwell. Not here." His face remained impassive, but there was something in his eyes, something raw. "I wasn't trying to be a hero." Luna swallowed hard. "Then what were you trying to be?" His lips parted slightly. For the briefest second, she thought he might actually tell her, that he might finally say it. But then, just like that, his walls slammed back up, and instead of answering, he did something worse. He gave her a choice. "If you really don't want my help," he said, voice even, "I'll undo it." Luna froze. His gaze didn't waver. "I'll make a call, and the money will disappear. The diner will be back in danger, if that's what you want." Her breath hitched, because he meant it. He was putting the decision in her hands. She clenched her jaw, fighting every instinct screaming inside her. Then, slowly, she whispered, "You know I can't let that happen." Something flickered across his face, something unreadable. Then he nodded. "Then we don't have a problem." Luna let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, we have a problem, Caldwell." He smirked. "Good to know." Then, to her absolute horror, he turned and walked away. Luna stood there, pulse racing, wanting to scream, because this, whatever this was getting too complicated. And the worst part, she wasn't sure she wanted it to stop. Luna didn't want to think about Theodore Caldwell, but it was impossible. The man had taken root in her life like a storm she never saw coming. He was everywhere, sitting in her diner, asking questions, showing up uninvited, fixing things she hadn't asked him to fix. And now she owed him. She hated that more than anything, because no matter how much she wanted to pretend otherwise, the truth was simple. If it hadn't been for him, she would have lost everything. The diner, her mother's legacy, her home, and that was a debt she could never repay. 3 days later, the diner was full, but Luna barely heard the chatter of customers or the clinking of silverware. All she could focus on was him. Theodore sat in his usual booth, sipping coffee like he owned the damn place. He hadn't mentioned the donation. Not once. He just showed up like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't just saved her entire world and left her drowning in questions. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. So, when the morning rush slowed and most of the regulars cleared out, Luna marched straight to his table and dropped into the seat across from him. He glanced up, surprised. To "What do I owe this honor?" She ignored the sarcasm. "Why did you do it?" His expression remained unreadable. "Do what?" Luna narrowed her eyes. "You know exactly what." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "If you're talking about the diner?" "Of course I'm talking about the diner," she hissed, leaning in. "Why did you pay off my debt? Why do you care?" Theodore set his coffee down slowly. "Would you believe me if I said I just wanted to help?" "No," he smirked. "Didn't think so." Luna exhaled sharply, frustration bubbling in her chest. "Then give me something, Caldwell. Because people don't just swoop in and save businesses for no reason." He studied her for a long moment, like he was weighing something in his mind. Then, for the first time, his mask slipped, and what she saw in his eyes made her stomach tighten. Regret, pain, something deep and aching. He looked down at his hands. "I knew your mother." The words hit harder than she expected. Luna's breath caught. "What?" Theodore's jaw clenched. "Margarita. I knew her a long time ago." Luna's mind spun, trying to process what he was saying. "How?" He exhaled. "Because I loved her." Luna froze. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. "You're lying." Theodore's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not." Luna shook her head. No way. If you loved her, where the hell were you?" His expression darkened. "I didn't know." The words came out hoarse, like they physically hurt to say. Luna's pulse pounded in her ears. "Didn't know what?" Theodore met her gaze, and when he spoke, her entire world changed. "That you're my daughter." The diner around them disappeared. Luna stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then, she let out a small, hollow laugh. No. Theodore's face remained unreadable. Yes. Luna shook her head, trying to fight the rising panic. No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to come into my life and drop this. I'm telling you the truth. Luna shot out of the booth, hands trembling. No, my father is nobody. My father is some guy who never showed up, never cared. Her voice cracked. Theodore's expression shattered. I didn't know, Luna. Bullshit. She spat, her heart hammering against her ribs. You don't just not know you have a kid. He swallowed hard. Margarita tried to tell me. She sent letters. She went to my father, but I never got them. Luna felt like she was going to be sick. No, she whispered. I swear to you, Theodore said, his voice rough, desperate. I would have been there. I would have... Luna's entire body tensed. You would have what? She snapped, eyes burning. Raised me, loved me, given a damn about me. Don't make me laugh, Caldwell. His expression twisted in pain. I would have... You would have nothing. She cut in, her hands clenching. Because you weren't there. You weren't there when she worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. You weren't there when she was sick and still refused to rest because she was terrified of losing the diner. Her voice cracked. You weren't there when she died. The silence that followed was deafening. Theodore's throat bobbed. Luna, but she was already backing away. I don't care who you are, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You don't get to call yourself my father. You don't get to pretend that you care. Because where the hell were you when I needed you? Theodore had no answer. Luna's eyes burned as she turned on her heel, pushing through the diner doors and into the cold Chicago air. She didn't stop walking, didn't stop running, because if she did, she might have to accept the truth. And she wasn't ready for that. Luna didn't stop walking. She didn't care that the Chicago air was bitterly cold, that her breath came in short, uneven bursts, or that she had left the diner in such a hurry that she hadn't even grabbed her coat. She just needed to get away from him, away from the truth he had just dropped like a bomb in the middle of her life, that you're my daughter. The words echoed in her skull, looping over and over, refusing to fade. No, 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 this wasn't real. It couldn't be. Theodore Caldwell, the billionaire, the arrogant bastard who had walked into her diner weeks ago like he owned the place, was not her father. He couldn't be, because that would mean her entire life had been a lie. Luna turned a sharp corner, her boots slamming against the pavement, the city lights blurring around her. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stop, because if she stopped, the weight of what just happened might crush her. Half an hour later, Luna found herself at the lake. The wind whipped at her hair as she stood at the edge of the dock, staring at the dark, rippling water. This was where she came when she needed to think. When things got too heavy, she folded her arms tightly over her chest, trying to contain the storm inside her. Her mother had always told her the truth. Margarita had never lied to her. So why? Why had she never told her about this? Had she known? Had she wanted to protect her? Or had she just thought it was too late? Luna squeezed her eyes shut. It didn't matter. It was too late now. She had spent 24 years thinking her father was a ghost, a nameless, faceless man who hadn't wanted her. And now he had a face, a name, a life so far removed from hers that she couldn't even begin to bridge the gap. A billionaire, a man who had everything, while she had spent her life scraping by. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. The sound of footsteps behind her made her body tense. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Theodore's voice was calm when he spoke. You shouldn't be out here without a coat. Luna let out a bitter laugh. Oh, really? Is that your fatherly concern kicking in? She shouldn't have said that, but she was angry, hurt, lost, and Theodore was the easiest target for all of it. He exhaled slowly. Luna, don't, she snapped, spinning around. The lake wind bit at her face, but she didn't care. You don't get to say my name like you've known me my whole life. Pain flickered in his eyes, but she refused to let herself feel bad about it. He deserved this, all of it. You don't get to walk into my life and decide you suddenly want to be my father, she continued, voice rising. Because I don't need a father. Theodore's jaw clenched. That's not what I'm trying to do. Then what the hell are you trying to do? She demanded, her hands shaking. He took a step closer, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "Because let me tell you something, Caldwell," she said, voice shaking with fury. "I spent my whole life believing my father didn't want me, that he wasn't there because he chose not to be." Theodore flinched. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what she had felt. "And now you expect me to just..." "What?" Luna laughed humorlessly. "Pretend that didn't happen. Pretend that knowing who you are magically fixes everything." "No," Theodore said, his voice steady. "I don't expect that." Luna clenched her fists. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't arguing, he was just standing there, taking every word she threw at him, like he had already accepted that he deserved it. It made her hate him more. Or maybe it just made her hate the fact that she couldn't figure out what to do with all the emotions crashing inside her. She turned back toward the lake, staring at the water, her breath coming in uneven bursts. Theodore's voice was quieter when he spoke again. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." Luna swallowed hard. "I'm not asking you to let me in." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I just needed you to know the truth." Her throat burned because wasn't that what she had always wanted? Hadn't she spent years wondering who he was? Why he hadn't been there? And now she had the answer. But it didn't feel like enough. It didn't fix anything. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted, her voice raw. Theodore didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, he said, "Neither do I." Luna turned, looking at him. For the first time, she saw something in him she hadn't noticed before. Regret. Not the kind people fake, the kind that stays with you. And for the briefest moment she wondered, what would have happened if he had known? Would he have been there? Would he have tried? She hated that she wanted to believe the answer was yes. Luna exhaled shakily. "I need time." Theodore nodded, like he understood, like he had been expecting that. "Take all the time you need," he said. And for the first time since this conversation started, she believed him. She turned away from the lake, shoving her hands into her pockets. "I'm going home," she muttered. Theodore didn't try to stop her. He just nodded once. Luna started walking, her mind still spinning, because even though she had no idea where this left them, for the first time, she wasn't running. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. Luna barely slept that night, even as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Exhaustion pressing down on her like a weight. Her mind wouldn't stop. How could it? She had spent her entire life believing her father was a ghost, an absent, careless man who had walked away without a second thought. And now she knew the truth. Theodore Caldwell wasn't a ghost. He was very real. And worse, he hadn't walked away. He hadn't even known she existed. That should have made things easier. But it didn't. Because even if she believed him, even if she let herself accept that he hadn't abandoned her on purpose, it didn't change the fact that he hadn't been there. He hadn't seen her first steps, hadn't heard her first words, hadn't been there when she got sick, when she scraped her knee falling off her bike, when she cried over her first heartbreak. He hadn't been there when her mother died. And Luna didn't know how to forgive that, even if it wasn't his fault. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to process this. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she felt completely lost. The next morning, Luna walked into the diner like a zombie. She was running on fumes, her body moving through the motions of opening the restaurant. But her mind was somewhere else. She barely noticed when Sophia walked in behind her, but she definitely noticed when her friend whistled. "Wow, you look like you got run over by a truck." Luna shot her a look. "Thanks," Sophia smirked. "I call it like I see it." Luna sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's just been a long night." Sophia eyed her carefully. "Does this have anything to do with a certain rich guy who keeps showing up?" Luna stiffened, Sophia noticed. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Did something happen?" Luna hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about what Theodore had said, and she didn't know if she wanted to, but the words were sitting on the tip of her tongue, pressing against her ribs, aching to be let out. After a long moment, she exhaled sharply. "He told me he's my father." Sophia dropped the coffee pot she had just picked up. It shattered against the floor. Luna winced. "Yeah, that was pretty much my reaction too." Sophia's jaw dropped. "Wait, what?" "What?" Luna crossed her arms, trying to keep her voice even. Apparently, he and my mom were together when they were young, but he didn't know about me. Sophia blinked rapidly, like her brain was short-circuiting. And, do you believe him? Luna chewed on her lip. I don't know. Sophia let out a low whistle. Damn, that's a lot. No kidding. Sophia hesitated, then asked, So, what are you going to do? Luna had no answer, because she had been asking herself the same thing since last night, and she still didn't know. Later that day, Luna was wiping down the counter when she saw him, Theodore. He was standing outside the diner, staring through the glass window like he wasn't sure if he should come in or not. Luna's stomach tightened. She should tell him to leave. She should ignore him. But before she could make a decision, he stepped inside. The bell chimed softly. The diner wasn't busy, just a couple of customers sitting near the window. Luna took a slow breath, then forced herself to meet his gaze. You're back, she said flatly. He nodded, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. I wasn't sure if I should be. She tilted her head. And yet, here you are. Theodore studied her carefully. I wanted to ask you for something. Luna narrowed her eyes. Ask me for something. His voice was calm but cautious. One conversation. Luna frowned. I won't push, he continued. I won't try to force anything, but I'd like to sit down with you just once. Luna hesitated. Everything inside her screamed to say no, to push him away, to protect herself, but a small, treacherous part of her wanted to hear him out. She hated that part. She hated that she was curious, and she hated that, deep down, she knew she would regret it if she didn't at least try. After a long pause, she sighed. Fine. Theodore blinked, almost surprised. Fine. She crossed her arms. One conversation. That's it. Something flickered across his face. Something almost like relief. He nodded. That's all I'm asking. Luna glanced at the clock. I have a break in an hour. We can talk then. Theodore gave a small nod, then took a seat in his usual booth. Luna let out a breath, her chest tight. She wasn't sure what she had just agreed to, but something told her that nothing would be the same after this conversation. Luna had faced a lot of difficult moments in her life. She had fought to keep the diner open when her mother got sick. She had worked double shifts to pay the rent. She had learned how to survive on her own, without ever relying on anyone. But this was different. This was personal. She wiped her hands on her apron and took a steadying breath before walking over to the booth where Theodore Caldwell sat. He looked up when she stopped in front of him. Ready? He asked. Luna wasn't, but she slid into the seat across from him anyway. Talk, Theodore exhaled, as if collecting his thoughts. Then, slowly, he began. When I was 19, he said, I thought I had my entire life planned out. Harvard, business, the Caldwell legacy. Luna didn't say anything, but she could hear the bitterness in his tone. But then I met your mother. Her stomach clenched. She changed everything, he admitted, a faraway look in his eyes. She made me question what I really wanted, made me wonder if I was willing to sacrifice happiness for success. Luna swallowed hard, because that sounded exactly like something her mother would have done. She was the first person who made me feel like I could be more than just my father's puppet, he continued. And for a while I thought, maybe I'd choose her over everything else. Luna's heart ached. She had never heard anyone talk about her mother like this before, like she had mattered, like she had been someone's world. But I was a coward, Theodore said quietly. I let my father talk me into leaving, into thinking that if I walked away from Harvard, I'd be throwing my life away. Luna's fingers curled into fists. So you left, she said bitterly. I did. She hated how calm he sounded, like he had made peace with it. Well, congratulations, she snapped. You got everything you wanted, money, power, success. Theodore's jaw tightened. And yet, she continued, voice sharp, you still ended up here, in my diner, so tell me, Caldwell, was it worth it? The silence that followed was heavy. Then, softly, he answered, no. Luna's breath caught. Theodore leaned forward slightly, his expression raw in a way she had never seen before. If I had known about you, he said, voice rough, I would have come back. Luna shook her head. But you didn't know. No, his throat bobbed. And I will never forgive myself for that. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. She just sat there, staring at the table, feeling like her entire world had been flipped upside down. After a long pause, Theodore sighed. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Luna." Her eyes flickered up to his. "But I want you to know that I'm here now," he said, voice steady. "And I'm not going anywhere." Luna's chest tightened, because for the first time she believed him, and that scared her more than anything. 20 minutes later, neither of them had spoken in a while. Luna had needed time to process everything, but the longer she sat there, the more something unsettled nagged at her. There was one last thing she needed to know. "Why now?" she asked suddenly. Theodore frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've been in Chicago for years," she said. "If you didn't know about me, what made you come into the diner that night?" Theodore hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, "Your mother's recipe." Luna blinked. "What?" He let out a small, almost self-deprecating laugh. "That night I had a meeting nearby," he explained. "It got canceled and I needed a place to eat. I walked in, sat down, and then," he exhaled, "I saw the menu and there it was. Margarita's house special." Luna's throat tightened. "I ordered it without thinking," he admitted. "But the moment I tasted it, I knew." "Knew what?" "That it was hers," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. It was like being punched in the chest. I hadn't thought about that meal in years. And suddenly, I was 19 again, sitting in her tiny apartment, watching her cook. Luna's stomach twisted. She could picture it. Her mother, younger, happier, in love. And Theodore, young, naive, still unburdened by the choices that would later define his life. It was painful to imagine. It was infuriating. And yet, for some reason, it made her want to cry. Luna cleared her throat, trying to push away the sharp emotions creeping in. "So you put it together," she said. Theodore nodded. "Then I saw you." Her heart skipped. "And I knew." Luna stared at him. At the man she had spent her whole life hating. At the man who had walked into her world and ruined everything she thought she knew. She didn't know what to do with this. Didn't know how to feel. So she did what she always did when things felt too big to process. She stood up. Theodore watched her carefully. Watched. "Luna, I need air," she muttered. Then she walked out of the diner. She didn't hear him follow, but she knew deep down that he would never be far behind again. Luna walked aimlessly through the streets of Chicago, the cold biting at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too loud. Every step she took, every breath she exhaled, she could still hear his voice. "I would have come back. I will never forgive myself for that." And I knew. She didn't want to believe him, didn't want to accept any of it, because accepting it meant accepting that she had spent 24 years thinking she wasn't wanted, when the truth was, she had simply never been given the chance to be known, and somehow, that felt worse. She hated that it hurt, hated that it was easier thinking he had abandoned her than knowing he had been kept in the dark, because now she didn't know who to blame. Her mother. No, she had tried. Theodore. Maybe he had left first, but the real villain in this story wasn't even alive anymore. The man who had buried the truth, Theodore's father, was dead, and Luna was left with the damage. She hated this, hated that she couldn't make sense of her own emotions, hated that for the first time in her life, she didn't know how to move forward, and most of all, she hated that, despite everything, a small, infuriating part of her wanted to know more. 2 days passed before she saw him again, not because he stayed away, but because she had avoided the diner entirely. She needed space, time. She had spent the first day holed up in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of their conversation like a loop she couldn't shut off. On the second day, she visited her mother's grave. She didn't say anything, just stood there in the freezing wind, staring at the name carved into the stone, feeling the ache of every unanswered question settle in her chest. Did you ever want me to know him? Did you ever think I would? Her mother had been her everything, and now, for the first time in Luna's life, she wasn't sure if she had the whole picture, and that made her feel so damn alone. On the third day, she walked into the diner, and of course he was there. Theodore sat in his usual booth, a cup of coffee in front of him, his sharp gaze flickering up the moment she stepped inside. Luna exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She had spent 2 days convincing herself she wasn't ready to deal with him. but maybe she never would be. And maybe that was okay. Without thinking, she grabbed a coffee mug, filled it, and walked straight over to his table. She didn't sit, didn't say anything, just set the cup down in front of him. A peace offering, a silent acknowledgement. Theodore studied it for a long moment before finally lifting his gaze to hers. His expression was unreadable. "You sure about this?" "No," but she shrugged anyway. "Not really." A small flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. Then, slowly, he reached for the cup. Luna let out a slow breath and slid into the booth across from him. She crossed her arms. "I have rules." Theodore raised an eyebrow. "Rules? If you're going to keep coming here," she said, "then you're going to have to follow them." A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "I'm listening." Luna held up a finger. "1. No hovering. I don't need you watching me like I'm some fragile little thing that's about to break." Theodore tilted his head. "Noted." She lifted a second finger. 2. No trying to buy your way into my life. At that, his smirk faded slightly. She pressed on. "I know you think money fixes everything," she said, "but this isn't a business deal, Caldwell. You can't throw cash at it and expect everything to be fine." His jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. "Fair enough." Luna hesitated before lifting a third finger. "And 3, she exhaled. "If you're serious about this, about getting to know me, you don't get to disappear again." The words felt dangerous leaving her mouth, like an opening she wasn't sure she wanted to give him, but if he was going to be in her life, then he damn well needed to stay. For a long moment, Theodore didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her carefully. Then softly, he said, "You have my word." Luna's chest tightened, because for some stupid reason, she believed him. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't impossible after all. Luna had spent most of her life convinced that she was better off alone. It was easier that way. People couldn't disappoint you if you never let them in. And yet, here she was, sitting across from Theodore Caldwell, the man she had spent 2 decades hating, watching as he sipped his coffee like this was just another morning, like they weren't two strangers trying to figure out how to piece together something that had never existed in the first place. She still didn't trust him, not completely, but for the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't feel the overwhelming urge to run, and that was progress. Theodore set his cup down, watching her carefully. "You're quiet." Luna raised an eyebrow. "You complain when I yell at you. You complain when I don't. Make up your mind, Caldwell." A slow smirk pulled at his lips. "I wasn't complaining." She rolled her eyes. "Could have fooled me." For a moment, the tension between them eased. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even comfortable. But it was something. Luna sighed, leaning back against the booth. "So, what now?" Theodore didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to get to know you," he said finally, "if you'll let me." Luna's stomach twisted, because that was a loaded request. It wasn't as simple as sitting down and talking. It wasn't just one conversation. It was years of missing pieces. It was undoing 2 decades of silence, and she didn't know if she was ready for that. So instead of answering, she asked, "Why?" Theodore frowned. "Why what? Why do you care now?" His expression darkened slightly. "You know why?" "No, I don't," Luna shot back. "Because if you hadn't walked into the diner that night, you never would have known. You would have gone your entire life without knowing I existed." She leaned forward. "So tell me, Caldwell, if that's the case, why do you care?" Theodore exhaled sharply, his gaze steady. "Because I can't change the past, but I can try to fix the future." Luna's chest tightened. She hated that part of her wanted to believe him, that a small, quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Maybe it's not too late." She clenched her jaw. "I don't know how to do this." Theodore's expression softened. "Neither do I." That admission caught her off guard. She had spent so much time thinking of him as this untouchable, powerful businessman, someone who always knew what to do. But now, she realized he was just as lost as she was. Luna hesitated. Then, carefully, she reached for her coffee cup and took a slow sip. It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start, and for now, that was enough. Later that day, Luna had no idea what she was doing. Theodore had left the diner an hour ago. promising not to push, promising to give her space. And yet, somehow, she found herself standing outside his office building, staring up at the towering glass structure like it was a different world. Because it was. She didn't belong here. She never had. And yet, Luna inhaled sharply, then forced herself to walk inside. The moment she stepped into the sleek, modern lobby, she regretted it. Everything was cold and expensive, the kind of place where people wore $1,000 suits and never made eye contact. Luna felt wildly out of place, standing there in jeans and a leather jacket, smelling like coffee and the grease from the diner's grill. But she was here now, and turning back wasn't an option. She walked up to the front desk. The receptionist, a sharp-looking woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, barely glanced at her. "Can I help you?" Luna swallowed. "I'm here to see Theodore Caldwell." The receptionist gave her a very obvious once-over, her expression unreadable. "Do you have an appointment?" Luna fought the urge to roll her eyes. "No." "Then I'm afraid." "Tell him it's Luna." The woman hesitated. Luna crossed her arms. "Trust me, he'll want to see me." After a long pause, the receptionist sighed and picked up the phone. Luna tapped her foot impatiently, half expecting Theodore to tell her to leave. But then, "Mr. Caldwell will see you now." Luna blinked. "That easy, huh?" The receptionist ignored her and gestured toward the elevators. Luna smirked. "You're fun." Then she turned and walked away. 15 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open, revealing a massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing behind a ridiculously expensive-looking desk, was Theodore. He looked up the moment she stepped inside. "You came." Luna shrugged. Apparently, he studied her carefully. "What changed?" She let out a slow breath. "I figured if we're doing this whole getting to know each other thing, then it's only fair that I see your world too." Theodore's lips twitched slightly, like he was trying not to smile. "I see." Luna walked further into the office, glancing around. "This is a lot," he chuckled. "That's one way to put it." She turned to him. "So this is what my life could have been, huh?" His expression darkened slightly. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that if I had known about you, you wouldn't have had to fight so hard." Luna's chest tightened. She hated that hearing that made her feel something. She let out a breath. "Yeah, well, here we are." Theodore nodded. "Here we are." A long silence stretched between them. It was awkward, uncertain, but it wasn't bad, for the first time since this whole mess started. Luna felt like she was standing on equal ground with him, like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't impossible after all. Luna sighed. "All right, Caldwell, show me your world." Theodore smirked. "Careful what you wish for, Luna." She rolled her eyes. "You wish you were that interesting?" And for the first time, Theodore laughed. A real, genuine laugh. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Luna wasn't sure what she expected when she told Theodore to show her his world. Maybe a grand tour of his empire. Some fancy conference room filled with billionaires in suits talking about stocks and acquisitions. Something ridiculous. Something completely detached from reality. But instead, he led her through the sleek hallways of his company, bypassing the intimidating boardrooms and polished offices, and straight into a department she never would have imagined he even cared about, a small, modest test kitchen. It was tucked away on the far end of the building, hidden behind all the corporate glamour. Luna hesitated as she stepped inside, taking in the stainless steel counters, the neatly arranged spice racks, the unmistakable scent of fresh bread in the air. It smelled like warmth, like something real. A man in a chef's uniform turned and did a double take when he saw Theodore. "Mr. Caldwell," he greeted, clearly caught off guard. Theodore nodded. "Marcos." He gestured toward Luna. "This is..." He hesitated, as if unsure of how to introduce her. Luna took the lead. "Luna Silva." Marcos wiped his hands on his apron before shaking hers. "Pleasure to meet you." She glanced around. "What is this place?" Theodore folded his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "We develop products here, new concepts for our restaurant chains, test ideas before they hit the market." Luna arched an eyebrow. "You own restaurants." He smirked. "Didn't expect that, did you?" She honestly hadn't. She had assumed he dealt in steel. Real estate, soulless industries built on profits and numbers. not food, not something as personal as this. Theodore motioned for Marcos to continue whatever he had been working on. I thought you might like to see it. Luna wasn't sure why that made something tighten in her chest. It wasn't just that he had brought her here. It was the fact that he had thought about it, that he had taken the time to find something she might actually be interested in, instead of trying to impress her with numbers and luxury. Marcos returned to his work, and Luna watched as he carefully plated a dish, his hands moving with precision. It reminded her of her mother, of long nights in the diner kitchen, learning how to perfect each recipe. Theodore stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your mother loved to cook. Luna's grip on the counter tightened. I know. She wanted to open her own place one day, he continued, his voice quieter now. Not just the diner. Something bigger. Luna swallowed. She never told me that. He glanced at her. Maybe she didn't want you to carry that weight. Luna wasn't sure how to feel about that. She had spent her life fighting to keep the diner alive, convinced that was what mattered most. But had she ever stopped to wonder if that was what her mother really wanted? The thought made her stomach twist before she could dwell on it too much. A loud voice interrupted. Well, I'll be damned. Luna turned just in time to see a man enter the kitchen. A sharp suit draped over his broad frame, his salt and pepper hair slicked back in a way that screamed money. He looked at Theodore with something between amusement and disbelief. What are you doing down here? Called